What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Rams Brothers. I'm your host, Dean, and I'm joined, as always, by my brother and the other great host of this show, Nick. And Nick, the schedule has been released. The Rams put out a video. There's a lot of detail that we're going to talk about in this episode specifically. But first and most importantly, how are you, my good brother?
They start the season off with a primetime game. That's making me feel pretty good. You're up against the Lions right away, right back to the team that knocked them off.
So your mental health is back in check now the fact that the schedule is released and the Rams got the Lions in week 2, wild card matchup again.
I would have loved it if it was Rams-Lions Thanksgiving, but I feel like the prerogative of Thanksgiving games is more just like NFC North team versus NFC North team. It's like never fun.
Yeah,
they always play like a divisional team.
We were just talking about that. Yeah, so we got the week 6 bye, which we just looked back into 2022, 21, 20, 19, 18. It's the earliest they've had the bye in the Sean McVay era. So 5 primetime slots. The max is now 6. The Rams got 5. We were thinking maybe 3, maybe 4. They got 5. 2 home games to end the season. 2 Thursday night football games, which is also now the new max. No international games. No holiday games, except for they have the Eagles right before Thanksgiving and they have the Jets right before Christmas. And then only 3 games with opponents coming off of their bye. So I think last year was 5 or 6 we were talking about in our last episode.
I got another for you. 3 games in the early window as well in the 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time slot.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like that time slot's always odd, but McVay always seems to rally his troops for those earlier games, even if he has to travel cross country. So that's going to be another interesting thing to look at. But week 1, we have a rematch of Super Wild Card Weekend. It was Rams-Lions Sunday night, 7:30 Eastern on Peacock. It's going to be primed. That's our first primetime game to get the season started. So the Lions are kind of in an interesting situation. I was looking at the roster, just trying to evaluate who they lost, who they picked up. They lost Josh Reynolds. He signed with the Broncos. So Jared Goff's number 1 target is no longer there. I guess you can't say number 1 because it's Amon-Ra St. Brown, but his go-to guy on third down situations when he's panicked and when he's getting pressured. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, he signed back with the Eagles, so they lost him. Jonah Jackson, we know, signed with the Rams. So they lost a total of 3 offensive linemen, including Jonah Jackson and Matt Nelson and Max Pritchard. But they re-signed Graham Glasnow. So they bolstered up their defensive line a little bit, but the offensive line, just adding Matt Nelson and Max Pritchard is a little bit shaky. But they added Marcus Davenport at edge, and they added DJ Reader inside, and they traded for Carlton Davis on the back end. But I think the big news with the Lions this offseason is Jared Goff signing his 4-year, $212 million contract, $170 million of that guaranteed. They also extended the Sun God, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 4 years, $120 million, and Penei Sewell, 4 years, $112 million. So they've invested $444 million just in their core as it stands right now. So they also drafted Terrion Arnold, who we absolutely loved in the draft, Ennis Rakestraw. So the Lions coverage unit, we saw it on the back end, and we talked about it in the preview episode when we were talking about the wild card game last year. They couldn't find their footing at all in 2023. They dropped near to the bottom of the league in several key metrics. And on passing downs, the Lions ranked 28th in expected points allowed per play, due largely to surrendering 108 explosive pass plays, which is good for 31st best, and then 29 touchdowns, which was 26th. So their over-under win total right now is at 10.5 wins. That game is going to be a hell of a lot of fun. You think they're going to get to their over-under win total this year, the Lions?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people want to sell Lions stock right now. I think they get over it. I think they're really a remarkable team. They kept all their coordinators, which is huge, which is not, we can't say the same about us. I mean,
true.
Losing Raheem, who was able to hold them to like 3 points, I think, in the entire second half of that wild card game. And our problem was we just couldn't capitalize in the red zone.
Yep.
Losing Josh Reynolds, though, I think is going to be something that's going to rear its ugly head big time for this Lions team, because he picked up a lot of first downs for them, and they haven't found somebody in the draft that's going to do that. I mean, I thought they drafted exceptionally well, but they don't have a Josh Reynolds guy that you can like plug right in. And I heard some people bring up Michael Thomas, but I mean, I just don't think that really fits with what they're trying to do there at all.
Yeah,
like exactly. A locker room type of guy.
Yeah. Yeah. There was that big fourth down play that we remember late in the wild card game that they just had opportunities. It was a 1-point game. So that rematch is exactly what I think everybody wants on Sunday Night Football in prime time for week 1. And then week 2, you got the Arizona Cardinals. So Jonathan Gannon, we remember him, shoom, shoom, shoom. All the offseason drama was so odd with him and the behind the scenes. But the Cardinals finished the 2023 season. They were 4-13 under him. So I think that there's plenty of room to improve. Obviously, the NFC West is going to be tough again, but they'll benefit from having Kyler Murray to start the 2024 season. You see Josh Dobbs getting sacked by Aaron Donald in this picture. He missed the first 9 games, not Josh Dobbs, but Kyler Murray, from recovering from that torn ACL. It required surgery at the end of the 2022 season. They scored 23 total points against our defense last year. 1 game with Kyler where they had 14 points later on in the season, and 1 game with Josh Dobbs where they only had 9 points. So they made some other additions. I feel like they're going to be in a much better spot in terms of the performance this year, but maybe not that much better. I think their draft was solid. They added Sean Murphy Bunting, DJ Dallas, and Justin Jones, an interior defensive tackle. But they lost Hollywood Brown. He went over to the Chiefs to play with Patrick Mahomes. But their draft that I just mentioned, they had the most draft picks in 2024 with 11. So some notables, you saw Marvin Harrison Jr., Darius Robinson, who we really liked from Missouri, Trey Benson, who many are considering to be the next Cam Akers, Christian Jones from Texas was a player that we really like. So I think they're definitely going to be better than last year. Over-under win total right now is set at 6.5. I think they're going to be right around there.
Hammering the over 6.5 for the Cardinals. I think it's like 70% of the money.
Really?
Is on over 6.5. Well, I mean, think about it. Kyler has a full year. They finally have like a dude at wide receiver who they drafted. They stayed in their lane during the draft. They got the pieces that they need. They didn't have to trade up and get a quarterback, even though it was this huge quarterback draft. They were like, no, we like Kyler. We paid him all this money. We're going to see this through. We have a new, with Gannon last year. I feel like the record of the Cardinals didn't represent what they became last year, where
scrappy at the end.
Yeah, they were really scrappy. They were a hard-nosed defensive team. They blew out the Cowboys, which at the moment it felt like a big deal, but ended up not really being all that impressive once we saw who they really were in the playoffs.
True.
But I mean, the Rams under Sean McVay, they've owned 2 teams, Seattle Seahawks and the Arizona Cardinals. It doesn't matter who our starting quarterback is. And I don't. After Gannon came in last year and they played Kyler, like, yeah, one of the times was Dobbs, but still, I just don't see them ever escaping from under the thumb of. I mean, yes, damn it. I was going to say under the thumb of Aaron Donald, but I mean, maybe that does change things with him not being the one sacking Kyler anymore.
Yeah, it does. And it's amazing how quickly some teams can turn things around. You saw with the Houston Texans, but like with the Cardinals specifically, going back to the Emmitt Smith days when they signed him and then they brought in Larry Fitzgerald and then they eventually signed Kurt Warner, went to a Super Bowl. It takes a couple of pieces, a couple of veteran pieces, a couple of guys that are experienced to just be able to turn things around. So it's not like the Cardinals are going to go from, 4 wins to 12 wins this season, but I think they're going to be a little bit more scrappy, more representative of what they were late in the season last year. And then week 3, you got the 49ers home versus the 49ers. So the first 2 games are on the road. So Detroit and Arizona. And then week 3, your home opener is going to be against the 49ers. So hopefully you get another picture of all those 49ers fans going down the elevator again, leaving SoFi Stadium with disappointment. But after the bang, bang 49ers gang lost the Super Bowl again, they didn't make a huge splash in free agency, in my opinion. They signed Leonard Floyd, Uter Gross-Matos, and Jordan Elliott were kind of their big moves, but they lost Eric Armstead, who was their longest tenured player, Javon Kinlaw to the Jets, and they lost Chase Young. So their front is going to look pretty much entirely different. So from their defensive line and from that perspective, they have some of the aforementioned names and new bodies that I just talked about that are going to try to make up for it. But it doesn't feel like San Francisco got better this offseason. Like I feel like lots and lots of one-year deals to try and keep their Super Bowl hopes alive. There's been a ton of offseason drama at wide receiver with Brandon Ayuk and Debo's contract situations. And if I were playing with Brock Purdy and he was my quarterback, he was throwing me the rock, I'd want some more money too. Let's be honest. So Sam Darnold's gone. They added Josh Dobbs, who we were just talking about, the astronaut. as a backup quarterback. So maybe you see him at some point in the season. Ricky Parasol was their top pick at number 31, who Kyle Shanahan very, very arrogantly compared to himself. And then cornerback Renardo Green from FSU, who benefited greatly from Jared Verse and Braden Fisk getting after the quarterback. Malik Mustafa, they do a great job of drafting back-end safeties and bringing in back-end talent. But then also Dominic Pooney on the offensive line from Kansas and Isaac Guerrero. Like, I hate them, but I really like their draft class a lot. So their over-under win total right now is at 11.5. So, I'm thinking it's the 49ers. They're probably going to be right at that number. If not, they're going to be at 12 wins. But I think 12 wins could potentially win you the division this year. So Rams at 8.5, Niners at 11.5. I think they have the highest over-under win total in the league. So expectation is they're going to be solid again, but we shall see.
Over 11.5 after a Super Bowl loss. I mean, we see it every year. You lose the Super Bowl, you're hungover. It does not escape anybody. We thought it escaped the Eagles, and then lo and behold, it did not. And they plummeted at the end. They lost to the Giants, and then they got their ass handed to them in Tampa because they couldn't finish that division out and win. It was
the only team, we'll talk about this when we get to the Eagles, but the only team that started 10-1 in the Super Bowl era and then lost 5 of their last 6 games. They were a lock to be the 1 seed, and you thought that was
imagine that.
Anomaly,
imagine you had Eagles over 11.5 and they're 10-1, and you're just like, oh my god, and they just blow it by the end. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen with San Francisco, but another year where San Francisco, it's like, oh, they're playing the Cowboys, they win. Oh, they have a test against Green Bay. They win. It's nonstop with them. The buck will end. I don't know if it's this year, but they'll get to a point where, not hopefully, but they're going to have to look themselves in the mirror, and Shanahan's going to have to say, if I want to win a Super Bowl, I'm going to have to get a quarterback that's better than Jimmy Garoppolo. And Brock Purdy is slightly better than Jimmy Garoppolo.
Hey, they traded 2 first-round picks and a third-round pick to move up for Trey Lance a couple of years ago, and then traded him to the Dallas Cowboys for a 4th-round pick. And they barely beat that Jordan Love-led Packers team, a 9-win team, the youngest team in the NFL in 2023. And we're going to see the Packers in Week 5 at home. But before we see the Packers, we're going to see the Bears. So Week 4, we go to Chicago. So 3 of the first 4 games are on the road. And their whole story is going to be about Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze. I really liked both of those players, obviously. We loved Rome Odunze, but I really liked the tackle that they took in Kieran Amegadije from Yale, and then Austin Booker from Kansas at edge. And the punter. Everybody can't stop talking about this punter. It's this generational prospect. It's just hilarious, considering it's a punter. But these are the new faces of the organization. They're over-under win totals at 8.5. They extended Jalen Johnson. They traded Justin Fields to the Steelers. I absolutely loved that they traded for Keenan Allen, a guy that's going to help mentor Rome Odunze. And they only had to give up a 4th-round pick to do it. They signed DeAndre Swift. They signed Gerald Everett, who all Rams fans are very, very familiar with. They also signed Kevin Byard on the back end. But their offensive line is still very much of a question mark. They pieced together well. I think they traded for Ryan Bates and they signed Coleman Shelton from the Rams. So Caleb Williams is going to have a new center. They also brought in Matt Pryor from San Francisco, which I liked a lot. But, USC's offensive line wasn't really that great either. And Caleb Williams was still a magician. So they have 2 new coordinators on both sides. Familiar name, Shane Waldron, is now calling the offense. So it's you might get a little bit of the old Rams 11 personnel, Caleb Williams, get him in a familiar system, get him moving around in the pocket, get him in empty a little bit, get him in the pistol, all things that he did in Chicago or at USC that I feel like he's going to be able to replicate in Chicago. So that game might be a little bit tougher than we expect. Considering
it's nice that we're getting him early. It's Week 4. He's still going to be finding his footing in the NFL. Over 8.5 wins in a division where you play the Lions twice, the Packers twice. Maybe JJ, there's no guaranteed wins, I don't think. You probably split with the Vikings at the very least, but that's a high number. And I know everybody wants to say that they have a really complete team. I kind of think they do too. So as soon as Caleb starts to get the ball rolling, I definitely think they will start to be scrappy like towards the end of the year, but definitely beneficial on our end that we're getting him at his 4th NFL start. Because I mean, eventually he's gonna turn into Caleb Williams NFL level.
Yeah, that division, according to Vegas, could be the best in football because the Bears are at 8.5, the Packers are at 10.5, and the Lions are also at 10.5. So
I'm hammering under 10.5 for the Packers. So I'm just
really interesting.
Hammering.
I think they're going to be improved because now we get the Packers in week 5. And I talked about how they were the youngest roster in the NFL, and they still found a way to win 9 games, and they almost beat San Francisco in the divisional round. And, some people might not be a big fan of Jordan Love, especially how he performed in primetime earlier on in the season. But when he started to catch fire, they made some noise in the playoffs. And I think they only lost that divisional game, 24-21? So they were close. They had opportunities to win that game in the end. But they lost Aaron Jones in the backfield. But their new backfield is a ton of fun, and I think it's going to help to complement Jordan Love. Josh Jacobs, Marshawn Lloyd, who Caleb Williams is very familiar with from USC, and A.J. Dillon is still there. But up front, they lost Josh Nijman, but they signed Andre Dillard, and they took Jordan Morgan in the draft. And they probably I think they got the best linebacker in the class in Edgerrin Cooper. And they were one of the only teams, probably the only team in the NFL, to take 2 linebackers in the first 3 rounds because they also took Tyron Hopper. So, maybe that's the Joe Barry special, who was a previous defensive assistant linebackers coach with the Rams. But their over-under win total is 10.5. For whatever reason, though, I just can't get this game out of my head. I can't get the Brett Rippon game out of my head because it was so painful. I lost that game 20-3, but it eventually led to the bye, which is odd because week 6 is a bye week for the Rams.
I mean, yeah, you flashed the Brett Rippon game. It just goes to show just how terrible our quarterback room has been outside of the key position for so long. Like outside of quarterback 1, the Rams quarterback room has been horrible for so many years. But I mean, that's not what we're talking about. The Packers, I mean, yeah, like they definitely turned it on at the end of last year, and they were a super young team, but none of it felt sustainable for me. I'm not like everybody's crowning Jordan Love like the next guy. It's like they go right from Favre to Rodgers to Love and assuming that Love is like already there. I don't think he's already there. He definitely showed improvement last year, but it's not like it's never linear. There are so many ups and downs that you have in this league. I mean, look at Goff's career. He was a bust. He was great in the Super Bowl. And he's a bust again. And then they're going to draft a quarterback in Detroit. And then he turns it around. Like there's so many intricacies and like different schemes that these quarterbacks are going to have to face. And Love was feeling it at the end. Don't get me wrong, but I just don't. Yeah. I don't think his style of play is as sustainable as people want to. Already attributed to.
No, I totally get it. Skill players are so important. Offensive line continuity is so important. Being able to keep a bolstered up backfield is really important for a young quarterback. But I think they did a good job, at least in one of those 3 areas. So that game's going to be really interesting.
Since the next is a bye, I think it's fair to spend a little more time on the Packers. I just don't like Matt LaFleur as a head coach.
But we love Mike. Mike,
listen. I love Mike. I just don't. Matt has had opportunities to go over the top, and you had Rodgers for prime years, or not prime years, past the prime, but still.
Yeah.
Like it was pathetic.
I don't love that the week 6 bye is so early, but when you have the opportunity, it's a little tough early on. Now you only have 2 of the first 5 games being home. And you're home, and then you have the bye. So at least you have a little bit more time to rest up because the second half of this schedule is going to be really tough. And it feels like you got.
Oh, but hold on. Before we go on to the Raiders, week 5 against home versus Packers is when I turn 30.
Oh, well, happy early 30th birthday to Nick.
Thanks.
Make sure to wish him happy birthday in the comments. But
before we
subscribe. So now we get to the Raiders. So the Raiders are really interesting, and I'd love to go back to this game, the Baker Mayfield game, where he just tore up the Raiders 17-16. I think they won in the last play of the game. The Raiders haven't beaten us, Nick. I'm going to have you guess the year. Since when? When was the last time the Raiders beat the Rams?
I'm going to guess the script, 2010. As it says right in the script. That's insane, though. Since we were the St. Louis Rams and they were still in Oakland. Wow.
Yeah. It's been that long. Yeah. So remember the 2018 game, Marcus Peters, the HMD moment where he's flying back into the end zone. Antonio Pierce is going into his second year. This is a team that has an over-under win total of 6.5. So there's going to be a quarterback competition between Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. So, tell me what you think of that. Devontae Adams and Max Crosby are probably thinking, this is my last year here. If we win 6 games, we're out. Like this is not a great organization. It's not well coached, not well ran. They released Jimmy G, who's obviously going to serve that 2-game suspension for the Rams. They also released Brian Hoyer. Hunter Renfrow is no longer there. Jerry Tillery is no longer there. They signed Michael Gallup, but nothing that I feel like truly, truly moved the needle. But what I thought was interesting about their draft was they took a flyer on Brock Bowers after having Michael Mayer in the building already. And they took him, I think the 13th overall pick. They also got Jackson Powers-Johnson, who I felt like was the best center in the league or coming out of the draft class. But they've been pretty much irrelevant since the early 2000s. I feel like it's been since the Tuck rule and Tom Brady that the Raiders have been almost entirely irrelevant for a 20-year span. So they're just not a concern. And I think you're able to beat the Packers, go into the bye week, and then have a layup right after that, a home game against the Raiders. That's some real opportunity to get rolling in the second half of the schedule.
This is I'm going to say it right now. It's a guaranteed Nick win right here. This will be on the picks come week 7. This Rams minus 8.5 or whatever it'll be. It's crazy to think that they literally haven't beat us since they played in a baseball stadium for their games. Remember that?
Yeah, it was the Oakland A's stadium. Yeah, I remember that. Absolutely.
No, hideous. It's a shame because it does feel like if this team gets going at some point somehow and they're like scrappy and it's like they're a quarterback away, if there is a free agent guy, I feel like that's the opportunity for him to come in because you said it. They have Devontae Adams, Max Crosby, and they just got one of the coolest new tight ends in Bowers. So it's like they have solid pieces, and then obviously, they're coordinators and they're, they play hard for this head coach that's like a team guy and all that stuff. But I just don't really think that that's going to translate into like a full season. It's different when he's like coming off the bench.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of confidence in the Raiders this year. And you know what? You got the Packers and you get the bye. Yeah, and then you got the Raiders, and then you got the Vikings, and then you got the Seahawks. So if you're going to try to string together some wins, you're going to have the Vikings in prime time, Thursday night football in prime time.
You remember the last time the Rams played the Vikings on Thursday night football?
Yeah, I do. Sure do.
It's the best Jared Goff game probably ever.
And that was at the Coliseum, which was, I think he threw for 5 touchdowns in that game.
Yeah, it was insane.
Hey, it was unbelievable. I think they put up 35 points, 38 points. They were incredible. So, between the Kevin O'Connell and Sean McVay relationship, the departure of Kirk Cousins, J.J. McCarthy now being there, Dallas Turner was also one of their top 2 first-round picks. I loved McCarthy in college, and I think he's going to be a great fit there, especially when you have guys like Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison to throw to. But I feel like Aaron Jones was their big offseason signing, because they lost 2 edge rushers. They lost Danielle Hunter. They also lost 3 edge rushers, Jonathan Greenard and also Andrew Van Ginkel, who signed with the Dolphins. So soon after, the off-ball linebacker Blake Cashman came aboard, and they were able to retain Brian Flores. So still like their coach, still like their defensive coordinator. And I think 7 or 8 wins is not out of the ordinary, but just because, they got a good head coach, you got a young quarterback, could catch some fire later on in the season. But that division is also going to be really, really tough, as we mentioned. I don't know how they don't finish last in the division this year.
Chicago could just Chicago it 100%, and their fan base is already ready to write Caleb off, which is just wild because
they have no confidence in the quarterback position.
No, which is
Jim
fair.
McMahon, Jay Cutler, and nothing. Really nothing.
It's valid for them to be skeptical for sure. Over under 7 for the Vikings. It feels, or 6.5. If that feels like right around where they'll finish. Probably finish like right under with 6 wins. I don't like McCarthy though. I mean, I did not think that was a good pick. I felt like they either had to trade up or get somebody available in free agency and like roll the dice next year, because I guess you can still do that if he is really bad. Like there's no saying that they can't, but I just don't like putting all of the stake on him as like your next guy when you have a really smart offensive coach and the best wide receiver in the game right now.
Yeah, I know. I felt the same way just about JJ McCarthy's arm talent. But then I went back to high school and to college, and he's won state championships, national championships, played in a pro style system.
So
has
did Stetson
that
Bennett.
ability. Yeah, well, not a high school champion. He was a college champion, one of the best programs. But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, that's totally fair. Like, yeah, I'm not going to go back and forth on JJ McCarthy and Stetson Bennett, but I feel like he's more of a winner, more committed to the game. But it's outside of the Stetson Bennett issues that
you don't call someone coming out of college a winner if it's like if they're good. Like you call them a winner.
True.
If they it's like, okay, they're part of a winning organization. It's like they are associated with a winning team. But like, oh, that Patrick or like Mahomes is a bad example. But no one's saying, oh, Caleb Williams, yeah, he wins a lot in that.
You're right.
At UNC.
Totally
it's
right.
like, no, he has a lot of talent. Like that's what you should be more focused on. It's a team sport.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're totally right. I feel like in O'Connell's system, he could be above average, and he could win seven games.
I really
you're right. That's totally a label that you put on somebody that you feel like lacks arm talent, lacks true athleticism, like those kind of things. I totally agree with you.
People say it about Goff too. It's like, oh well, wherever he goes, they win. It's like, well,
yeah,
a lot of
I know.
around them.
I get it. I totally get it. And then you got the Seattle Seahawks. So this is the first time you're going to see the Seahawks all season. It's going to be in week 9. You're going to be in Seattle. Swept them last year. Probably going to do it again. No more Pete Carroll, but Mike McDonald from Baltimore is now their head coach, who I think we scored 37 points against Baltimore in overtime last year. But, they're doing a lot of good things schematically. And you saw a couple other pieces. Anthony Weaver also left from that program, a couple of other coaches. So obviously they're doing something right. But their offense for the majority is going to remain the same with the new offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb from Washington. So, I don't love bringing in college coordinators. I just don't. It never worked for the Rams. I don't think it's going to work for Seattle. And I was pretty sad when they released Jamal Adams because Cooper Kupp just consistently cooked him when he was healthy. And it was a joy to watch. But Quandre Diggs, Jamal Adams, Will Dissly, those are all veterans that are being released. And Byron Murphy, their top pick, thinks he's Aaron Donald, and he's just not. And I liked A.J. Barner from Michigan. I like DJ James from Auburn, but otherwise lackluster. I think 8-9 wins is overachieving for them, and their over-under win total right now is at 7.5. So Seattle's always an interesting matchup, but we've owned them in the past.
Baker Mayfield last year had the Geno Smith year where it did him like a good enough job where he's going to be signed for a couple more years. And we're on year 3 of the Geno Smith experiment. And I don't think anybody is looking at Seattle like a Super Bowl contender at all. And I think with those two guys, you really limit yourself of how far you can go. And that first round of the playoffs kind of feels like you're like max bar. Like maybe you get past it, but nobody's going to be thinking that you're going to get further through that. And, when you release Pete Carroll, maybe that's kind of what you're indicating, where it's like, okay, Geno, like you got the reins one more year, but I don't know exactly what his deal is, but it is funny.
I thought they were going to draft a quarterback. I really did. I thought they were going to take a quarterback in this draft because, it's a new era, a new head coach. I thought that was going to change, but
would be a perfect guy to like work under, and he starts for the first 3 games. Exactly. And I feel like he would be understanding of that. But like DK Metcalf, like just going through this list of Justin Jefferson, Devontae Adams, that's 3 teams in a row with an amazing wide receiver that it just doesn't really have the guy that's throwing to him. And it's almost just like a shame. It's like these guys' talents are almost being wasted. DK Metcalf, if he wasn't on Seattle, I would love watching him, but he's just such a big baby in Seattle.
Same thing with Jackson Smith-Njigba and Tyler Lockett, like in the same kind of situation, like, just underfed. And then you're moving on, you get the Dolphins. in week 10. So this is another primetime game, Monday Night Football. You got the reunion of Odell Beckham Jr. and Jalen Ramsey, which I think is going to be the big story, is Jalen Ramsey and Odell Beckham Jr. against the Rams again. I think this game could feature a ton of offense. Like, we know how fast the Dolphins like to play with A-Chain and Tyreek Hill, but there's not a lot of strength in their interior offensive line. And I'm not the biggest fan of Tua. I know some people might be, but I just think from, quarterback perspective, arm strength, he's got the smarts, but he's a beneficiary of the system. And I think especially going against a revamped secondary that the Rams are going to have, it's going to be all about OBJ and Tyreek Hill, but I feel like our secondary is going to have a decent matchup against these guys. And defensively, I didn't love that they moved on from Vic Fangio. They brought in Anthony Weaver from Baltimore, who I do like, but they lost Christian Wilkins. They lost Robert Hunt. They lost Andrew Van Ginkel. They brought in Andrew Van Ginkel, rather, and they tried to make up for it in free agency with guys like Jordan Brooks and Anthony Walker and Shaq Barrett. Their top pick was Chop Robinson. Bradley Chubb is coming off of the ACL. Jalen Phillips is recovering from an Achilles. So, I love the fact that those two guys are reunited, and you see the NFC Championship victory in the background. But they just had horrible, horrible injury luck towards the end of the season, and felt bad for them. But over/under win total at 9.5.
That's low, right? That feels low.
Yeah, I don't know. When you lose interior offensive line talent, and you have a quarterback who has concussion issues and doesn't have a strong arm, it's a lot of things can get out of whack there. And your two big defensive faces are coming off of major, major injuries. So a little bit shaky. I feel like that's why Vegas dropped them down from 10.5 to 9.5.
Yeah. I mean, I love that this is a Monday night game. It seems like two hopefully high flying offenses going up against each other. And it just hopefully there's the same amount of love that OBJ showed the Rams last year when they met them in Baltimore. Hopefully we see that reciprocated with Ramsey, but I feel like we're not going to, and I think there's a little bad blood there. So I think that's maybe one of the reasons why this escalated to Monday night, to be honest with you.
I was thinking the same thing. Thinking the exact same thing. And then week 11, you got the Patriots. And it's always the AFC East that gives the Rams issues. So that's going to be a tough game. Like, their over/under win totals at 4.5. But Drake May and Jared Mayo, like, it's not a game that I would want to underestimate, considering that everybody thinks that they're going to be just so terrible again. And they're going to be spoilers. That's what they are. They're late in the season. They're going to be tough defensively. They still have a ton of talented personnel. And I really like the head coach. I think they're eventually going to go in the right direction. But, I don't think that game's going to be a blowout as many people expect it to be. I don't think the Patriots are going to be as bad as 4.5 wins, maybe 6, maybe 7 wins. But we shall see. I think that game's going to be interesting. And then week 12.
Whoa. I got nothing to say about the Patriots.
Go ahead. Were you want to say something? I know you have a strict cutoff with your timing. So if you want to say something, go ahead.
No. I mean, I want to comment on these guys as much as the next guy. It's just so beautiful that I see the New England Patriots win total sitting at over/under 4.5. It just brings a very nice feeling to my heart.
They're no longer the team that they once were.
Yeah, it's just remarkable. The Belichick's not even there. Like, it's and like, I feel like I don't even have to just have a hatred for them anymore. It's like, yeah, maybe they'll be cool. I'll never root for them, but they took 2 Super Bowls from us.
Yeah,
still.
And I totally agree. It's just, I don't like to ever underestimate teams from the AFC East because of what happened. What was it, 2020, where the Jets beat us? They got their first win of the season. They were 0-13, and then they beat Jared Goff, and they just destroyed him. And then I think the Dolphins the week after, where it just felt like the whole Super Bowl window was unraveling. And it's just the stresses of the AFC East that they could put on you, having to travel cross country, going to New England, it's just something I don't want to underestimate. And then you got your back home against the Eagles.
Another prime time.
Go ahead.
There's just another primetime game.
Yeah, another Sunday Night Football primetime. Over/under 10.5 wins for the Eagles. I feel like it's still a bit too high. Yeah, it's Jalen Hurts paired with Saquon Barkley, but even Eagles fans are underestimating the departure of Jason Kelsey. I hear it all the time on the radio. They just, oh, it's a center. How could a center be that impactful? It's a all-pro Hall of Fame center, one of the best to ever do it. You still have guys like Lane Johnson up front, Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens. It just reminds me of like when Andrew Whitworth left and they were like, oh, yeah, well, Joe Nopum's going to be great. We said it too. Joe Nopum's going to be a great stopgap guy.
You always do it. You always do it. Every team.
Yeah. Oh, of course, because you're trying to talk yourself into it. And, you still got guys like Jordan Mailata. A.J. Brown just got a new deal. Skinny Batman, a.k.a. Devontae Smith, is still on the team. He's a great, great player. So, that they were bad defensively last year, but they are the only team, as we mentioned, in the Super Bowl era to start 10-1 and then lose 5 of the last 6 regular season games and just collapsed. Absolutely collapsed. But it was their secondary that was a huge issue. I really, really like that they brought in Vic Fangio, but they almost fired Nick Sirianni last year. It was almost fired and brought in favor of Bill Belichick or somebody else. But I absolutely loved Quinyon Mitchell. We loved Quinyon Mitchell in the Senior Bowl. We loved Cooper DeJean all the way back in January, February.
Yeah.
And they were able to get both guys. And we know how much respect Sean McVay has for Vic Fangio. So that game, I feel like, is going to be a little bit trickier than he expects. Or we feel like Sean McVay has entirely solved the Vic Fangio scheme with Brandon Staley, Raheem Morris, Chris Shula, and we're just going to tie a bow on this horrible relationship we've had with the Eagles over the last couple of years.
It is funny how they bring in Vic Fangio for the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. Like he's like this like correspondent, like almost like on the Daily Show. It's like a special guest correspondent, and it ended up not helping. And then they want to have him, and then the Dolphins end up getting him, and he kind of had a lackluster season over there. The Dolphins couldn't really stop that many people. And then
it was those injuries that were so bad. They were the 10th overall defense. And I remember Ramsey was pissed when he got fired.
Yeah.
But I know what you mean.
And then, and now they're on the Eagles, and now you have Sirianni who isn't calling any plays. Like it is essentially the guy that's just going to be slapping asses in the locker room like he did on draft day, which is just so weird. It's hard for me to see a world where they are as successful as they thought that they would be at this point after just making it to a Super Bowl. I just see it's hard to see the like the cast just turn 100% back to 10-1 because now everybody saw the stink on your team. It's like that's a real thing.
Tons and tons of locker room issues. Guys weren't communicating. Guys weren't talking to each other. And even with all pros in the building, when that kind of stuff happens, that's how a collapse happens. And it all starts with the head coach.
Jason Kelsey, I was just having this conversation with my friends. Out of like the active like Philly sports players, like Jason Kelsey was probably the number one guy. But now that he's retired, I think it dips all the way down to baseball for Bryce Harper. And it's just like, it's such a football town. I know it's just a big sports town, but they love their Eagles so much there. And to have an Eagle not be like the guy right now is just very, very weird.
Yeah, I mean, Jalen Hurts has to step up, and Saquon, they're pouring so much love into. Gave him a huge contract, like $38 million over 3 years. So, I mean, that's not running back money. That is, I'm panicked. I need to be able to run my scheme efficiently as perfectly as I possibly can. And whatever they had last year, DeAndre Swift and Boston Scott, and there was another talented back in the backfield, and they just weren't able to do it. So it's going to be interesting to see how that
running back in the last 5 years has not been good for anybody.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And then we got the Saints. Then we're at the Saints.
This was such a freaking amazing game last year when we just dismantled the Saints. I think it was Thursday night, right? Am I nuts?
I'm not. It may have. Yeah, it was because they were coming off of the short week. I think it was Commanders and then the Saints, and then they had to go fly cross country to play the Giants, I believe.
Right.
But what happened was like that. This was the exclamation point on the season. It was like, okay, they could string together something in a 3-day span. They're better than a team that's still hunting for the playoffs, that's going after Matthew Stafford. And they were just able to put together a much better game plan. And I feel like the matchup against the Saints, the coach, Dennis Allen, soft. The quarterback, Derek Carr, soft. Like there's plenty of confidence. going against
last year was the year Derek Carr had to like be the guy, and he was
not.
so not the guy. And I remember I had their alternate win total of like 8, like over 7.5, and they just got there at the very last game that they didn't even need. And they thought they could, like, if they won, there's a chance that they could get in the playoffs. If the Bucks lost, but then the Bucks won, it was just a whole crappy division. But they are not. They don't have anything special on their team. Derek Carr proved to not be the guy. It somehow was even more the guy when he was in Las Vegas, and then he comes here with better weapons and supposedly better organization, and just poop the bed.
Yep. Yeah. I don't have a lot of confidence in either of those guys. Skill players feel like they're diminishing. Alvin Kamara is another year older. Michael Thomas not there. Chris Olave was on and off last year. So just not a ton of confidence in them. And then the Bills, another tough AFC East matchup. So you got the Eagles, the Saints, and the Bills. So it's going to be a pretty tough stretch. This game's going to be at home, thankfully, but Stephon Diggs no longer Josh Allen's number one target. But I feel like they've had our number the last 2 times that we faced him. We almost came back. I think it was the 2021 season. And then was it 2022? They just kicked our ass in the first week of the season. So it's, the Bills are always tough. AFC East, this kind of opponent is not somebody that you want to face later on in the season, especially if they're getting hot. But again, another team that I feel like their Super Bowl window is starting to close up a little bit, because of how much talent they've had offensively over the last couple of years. And it's going to be a big question mark with them at that point in the season.
Yeah, they need the ball to bounce their way. I feel like their Super Bowl window is not closed, to be honest with you. I think Josh Allen being in his prime is going to leave that window open for a little bit longer. But they have always – I don't remember the last time we beat the Bills, to be honest with you.
No, I know. It's been a while.
It had to have been pre-Josh Allen. I mean, it's not like we played them that often, but 2020, we almost had that giant comeback against them. We played them week 1 after we won the Super Bowl, where I went to the game and was arguing with Bills fans, and they were like, "You probably don't even remember the first time you won a Super Bowl." And I had to list all the players on the St. Louis Rams team that won. But
did you say you guys have never won a Super Bowl and you lost 4 straight? And that
we actually ended up mending ways and like handshaking after.
I was like, they can't be saying anything about any Super Bowls. They've never won one.
Yeah, they're relatively nice people. They're insane. But this is I'm going to do another Nick guarantee L here.
Oh, all right, interesting.
Yeah, which is okay. It's fine. Yeah, losses are solid.
Yeah, and then you got the 49ers Thursday night prime time. That's going to be the 5th prime time game of the year. So I'm not going to go over the Niners again, but
but don't have to go over the Niners again. But we should go over the fact that we have 2 Thursday night games for the first time ever.
Yeah, first time for the Rams ever. I think it's the first time that teams are eligible to be able to do it this year.
This is an absolutely brutal 4-punch. Eagles, Saints, Bills, short week, Niners. And then fly to New York.
Yeah, then you got to go play the Jets. Yeah, it's going to be really difficult. But you know what? You have that opportunity to go fly with the Jets. You're going to have extra days rest after the Thursday night game, but the team's going to be banged up at that point in the season. Like, that's going to be a really, really tough game to recover from. I think the way, you get a team that has an early bye is the reason why multiple Thursday night football games are scheduled. Although it's inconvenient earlier in the week, it does give teams mini buys after the Thursday night football game is played, because they have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then the whole next week to prepare. So, that's the hope, is like, you're prepared. Maybe the Jets are all banged up, Aaron Rodgers. I think, though, if Rodgers stays healthy, week 16, we're at the Jets, you got to fly. You're in San Francisco, and then you got to fly all the way to New York, or New Jersey, rather, at MetLife. If Rodgers is healthy, we're going to have ourselves a game. But Zach Wilson is now in Denver with Sean Payton and Bo Nix. It's Rodgers, and his backups are going to be Tyrod Taylor, and then 2 guys I've never heard of in my life, Andrew Peasley and Colby Suits. They added Tyron Smith to protect Rodgers.
RFK Jr.'s running mate.
Yeah. They added Tyron Smith to protect Rodgers, right? So that's another massive, massive question mark at left tackle with health. Mike Williams is always hurt. They brought him in at wide receiver. Javon Kinlaw is now reconnected with Rob Saleh, which, I think is going to be an interesting pairing. They love their defensive line in New York. And An over-under win total at 9.5. I think that was probably the trickiest line for Vegas to set because that, for whatever reason, that 2020 game lingers in my head. But it's going to be a totally different matchup at this point in the season.
No, we talked about it on the last episode. I'm totally shocked that this is not a primetime game. This feels way more primetime to me than the Niners again.
I wish it was that way. Yeah, I wish the Jets game was primetime and we didn't have Thursday Night Football against the Niners after that tough stretch. But this, from week 12 on, you got the Eagles.
No, sorry, continue.
No, week 12 at home, you got the Eagles, Sunday Night Football in primetime. Then you got at the Saints, home versus the Bills, at the Niners, at the Jets, and then home versus the Cardinals and home versus the Seahawks. So you end with 2 divisional games, 2 home games, but that doesn't mean that it's not a tough stretch for 8 weeks.
No, and like week 16 is when you start to become like a team. Like you have to like pull it together, and you really need these wins. And I feel like the Jets will probably be in a situation where that win is going to mean a lot to them. Because like they're probably going to be fighting for a playoff spot or maybe potentially the division. So yeah, it's going to be like really spicy, and for that just to be tucked away at a 10 a.m. window, it's just kind of sad.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. All right, we're going to go one by one. I want you to give me your win-loss prediction.
Okay.
All right, ready? Lions week 1.
I think we upset the Lions. The win.
Okay, win. 1-0. Week 2 at the Cardinals.
It's another win.
2-0. Week 3, home against the Niners.
That's an obvious L.
All right, 2-1. Week 4 at the Bears. 3-1. Week 5, home versus the Packers.
Tie. No, I'm gonna say that's a loss. All
right, so we're 3-2 going into the week 6 bye. Home versus the Raiders, week 7.
They win.
All right, so that's what, 4-2. Week 8, home versus the Vikings, Thursday Night Football primetime.
Win.
5-2. Week 9 at Seattle.
Win.
6-2. Week 10, home versus the Dolphins.
That's a loss.
6-3. Week 11 at the Patriots.
Win.
7-3. Week 12, home versus the Eagles.
Loss.
6-4. Is that where we're at?
Yeah.
6-4. Week 13 at the Saints.
Win.
7-4. Week 14, home versus the Bills.
I feel like you have to split this game. I'm going to say it's a loss.
7-5. Week 15 at the Niners, Thursday Night Football.
Win.
8-5.
Yeah.
Week 16 at the Jets.
Loss.
8-6. Week 17, home at the Cardinals.
Win.
9-6. Week 18, home versus the Seahawks.
Win.
All right. So 10-7, same record as last year.
It's a really tough schedule.
Yeah.
Strength of schedules. Let's not go through it again with you, but where do you think they end?
I have them at like 11 wins this season.
That's like right around where I got them.
Yeah, I mean, you could get lucky. The Jets could be unhealthy later on in the season. Seattle, you're considering Seattle and the Cardinals to be clean sweeps. But then like the Saints, we got as a lock win. They beat the Eagles this year. I think the Eagles are going to just collapse at some point. The Dolphins on Monday night, that game's going to be really fun. So I think they could squeak out 11 wins as long as Matthew Stafford stays healthy.
Yeah, like the Dolphins game could go either way. Same with the Eagles. The Packers. So like I feel like they hover around that like 9-12 area of wins.
Yeah.
But I like if it's less than 9, then I don't even want to think about where we'll be this time next year.
It's going to be tough,
I
especially
think it'll be less than 9 though. You don't give a team unless they just came off a Super Bowl win. You don't give a team that many primetime games if you don't expect them to be good. That's just not what you do.
I totally agree.
But then last year the Jets had like 6. Written more Zach Wilson primetime like 6 times.
It was such a mistake. Yeah, I felt bad for him after like the 3rd or 4th primetime game, just getting cooked. Yeah. All right, longer episode. Schedule releases here. Schedule releases live. Hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure that you guys ram it. I'm gonna go have a sandwich. Nick, how about you?
You're gonna have a 9 p.m. sandwich. I am
Yeah.
going to.
I had to skip dinner in preparation for this big time episode, so I'm
That's
ready
what
to
he
go.
does for you fans out there. He skips dinner for you. So why don't you buy a Rams Brothers t-shirt or a mug or a sticker or something?
I'd be happy if he just subscribed and watched the episode. That's all I could ask for.
I want some money. Thank you for listening.
We appreciate you guys. Go Rams.
Go Rams.